start.
It's working. Thank you.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah, yours working. Yeah, that's life. Well, thank you. It's great to have you here, and you can look at the size of the turnout. There's obviously a great deal of interest. What I want to do is, I'm going to start talking to you about your early life. Yeah, it's quite a time ago, but mine is. I want to show some clips from the 3 films that we've had here and ask you about them. Plus, I want to talk to you about a play that I suspect a lot of people haven't seen that was streamed recently called Cypress Avenue. Anyone? How many people here have ever seen Cypress Avenue? Oh, it's not bad. Well, I'll explain why I want to do it, because it was devastating, I thought. And then we'll talk about your wider life at the end. But if we can start, let's start with your upbringing in Belfast. You were in a non-religious household, is that right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Your mum was an atheist?
That's what she eventually said when she started meeting middle-class people who told her that not believing in God was being atheist.
I don't know. It just didn't bother their arse.
And it was a female household, is that one?
Yeah, I'd 3 sisters, my granny and my mother, and a father who was in the pub.
And he was in the pub a lot of the time?
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a kind of an ecumenical alcoholic. He would talk to anybody as long as there was drink.
Now, you were brought up in Belfast pre the Troubles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then during them as well.
But you weren't really therefore part of the sectarian divide as such. You didn't see it as that.
Oh, you can't help but smell that divide wherever you are. It's evil.
And what about school? Because schools, you either go to a Protestant school or a Catholic school. Right?
Yeah, they call it state school or a Catholic school, you know. Yeah. I think that's the most poisonous part, you know. But, yeah. I mean, I had, friends from both sides living around the corner from me. Played football together, everything like that, you know. But it's look, the place that they call the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland, I call it the north of Ireland, was established as a sectarian state. That's what it was there for. It was illegally established to provide a majority, a perpetual majority for unionists. And at the moment, even as we speak, you can see that they're going through a whole tormented way of trying to prevent the Catholics finally asserting their majority, which they've got, because they won the election, yeah? And there are, thousands of Orange men marching saying they will never enter a united Ireland. So it's just stasis, and it's very painful, I think. Sorry, you didn't want to get onto this.
Yeah, no, we'll get onto it. You've seen Belfast, the film, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And rumour suggests to me that you weren't that impressed by it.
Who said that?
A friend of yours.
Well, I was going to... Is Kieran here? No, I was going to go around all the cinemas where it was showing, and after the title, put a question mark.
And the question mark meaning, is this really Belfast?
Belfast? No, well, I mean, in the smallest possible way, there was never any black teachers in Belfast.
Yeah.
There just weren't. I mean, that's so he did that kind of. Anyway, I shouldn't, but it's just. And I come from Belfast 15, where it was set, and all I tell you is that my granny didn't talk like Judy Dench.
Do you think it was a romantic? It was Kenneth Branagh's romantic view of his childhood.
It's. I'll tell you one thing. I worked with Ken Branagh a few years ago, a good long time ago, in an O'Casey play called Shot of a Gunman, and he was talking to me about his childhood, and I said, "That's very interesting, you know." He said when they went to Reading, actually I think his next film is going to be called Reading. and I said to him, he was saying when they arrived in Reading, his mother never left the house for a year because she was embarrassed about her accent. His brother immediately had an English accent, and Kenneth spoke in an English accent outside the house and an Irish accent inside the house. And I thought that's kind of interesting, but that's, and I saw him take it on board, but that's not the film that he made, you know. It didn't have that. I didn't see that personal. Anyway, I shouldn't really be criticizing him. I just, No, I won't go into a deeper criticism of him.
Okay.
But I don't. I think he's trying to say, oh, Belfast people are fine. Belfast people are fine, but there's also a ghastly situation. I mean, the film Angel that we just watched, which Neil Jordan isn't from Belfast, but I think the cop in there was so sinister and saying, no, people are bad and everything. People are bad, and there's, it's a deliberately sectarian world, and people behave as they're supposed to behave. They go and, there's a man used to, on the Schull Road, I won't mention his name, but he used to get up every morning and drive to the Falls Road and shoot at people who were Catholics. I mean, what kind of,
And that was happening in your childhood, or
No, it was happening after the trouble started. But, yeah.
All right, let's go back.
Sorry, am I driving you mad?
No, I'm fascinated. Your parents both left school at 14.
Mm.
You presumably were the first of your family to go to university.
My elder sister, was the first. She was a really smart girl, but it just happened with the post-war education act, which probably you were a benefit.
Exactly, yeah.
I was very conscious of the fact that suddenly there I was going to university, and just a couple of years ahead of me were people like Seamus Heaney, Seamus Dean, all the Stuart Parker, all these incredibly bright people, and so it created a different world for me to live in that I wouldn't have lived in. I wouldn't have been able to make it for myself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always said my mother was one of those women for whom feminism came too late. She was intelligent enough to deserve more than leaving school at 14.
So in another generation or two generations on.
Her daughters, out of my three sisters, two of them went to university, and the other one was a nurse, became a nurse.
So where was the drive at home to go to university?
All from my mother, all from.
She was determined.
Yeah. She was making you do your homework and pushing you to do. Yeah, and I think it was the same with mothers all over the place there. They knew that was the way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you study?
English and French.
And did you enjoy it?
Well, I enjoyed it afterwards, really. I loved reading aloud. That was my one talent, I think, reading aloud. And so English was very important to me, and then also that's why I did French, German, and Spanish when I was at school, because you got a chance to read. And all the other kids were embarrassed reading aloud, you know. Mostly it was just, you know, and some teachers asked me to read more than once, you know, so I knew that I got a great pleasure in it, you know.
And that was the time of the civil rights movement.
Yes, that was coming up, yeah.
And was that influential on you at university?
Very influential, yeah.
In what way?
Well, I knew all these guys, and knew people like Eamon McCann and Michael Farrell, and there were all these radical, it was interesting, within a couple of years of people getting free third level education, the next crowd said, who gives a shit about this, you know? Let's get some of the, you know, there's more things we should be getting, civil rights, you know, and that was terribly exciting, and I was, yeah, part of that with those guys.
And you were part of it, you thought you found
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Had you thought of that before you went to university, or did that come to you at university?
No, I mean, no, I only thought about it when I went to university.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when the government realised their big mistake. They were educating scruff dogs who were turning against them.
So you, and that's where your politics came from.
I suppose so. But yeah, I lived in a very mixed area, and I read a lot of history, and I made a point of meeting a lot of people that were, and then, you know, theatre is very, certainly it's a very Catholic thing in the North, you know. It's very, that tight Protestant stuff is a nightmare, because they didn't, you know, when they built a theatre in Derry, they had to do something equivalent in the Protestant water side, and they asked for like a swimming pool with, you know, with waves in it and things. You know what I mean?
Well, the theatre.
That was as dramatic as they could make it. You don't want to know the truth, is what they were saying.
So when did you start acting?
Oh, I started acting before I left school. There used to be a thing in the BBC in Belfast. Used to have a thing called, you wrote simply on a postcard, I want to be an actor, with your name and address on it, and then they would pull you in and give you an audition, and then you would do a play and children's programs, you know.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I acted at school a bit, and then I did a lot at university. Yeah.
And did you know then that's what
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I knew very early that I wanted to be.
you wanted an actor?
Well, I wrote a. We were all had at school to write a composition about, you know, myself in 10 years' time. You know, even when you were 10. So I was writing about having a theatre that I ran myself. Sitting.
Even at 10?
Yeah.
And you did?
I think Branna was looking over my shoulder.
So what, if you hadn't been an actor, did you ever want to be a writer as opposed to the actor?
Well, yeah, I had ambitions to do that, but I'm not. But then I found all these great writers, you know what I mean, Friel and Heaney and all these guys, you know, and yeah, I was very interested in theatre, like the Abbey had been, which influenced society and influenced politics in a way. So I was very interested in that.
So you went to the theatre school, the Abbey Theatre School?
Well, I think they say I did, but in fact there was no classes. You know, it was very rough and ready. You know, I mean, there was a woman called Rhea Mooney who was taught to speak verse by W.B. Yeats, but they never gave you a class with her. I thought, I didn't know until she was dead that she'd been taught by Yeats, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be fascinating to have had a class with someone, with one of the leading poets in any language, you know, who happened to start that theatre, you know, but it was very through other, the whole thing, you know.
Yeah. And after that, you went to London?
I went to London then, yeah.
Why was that?
I'd had enough, you know. I was a couple of years in the Abbey, and it was there was a man called Ernest Blythe running it who was truly without any theatrical instinct whatever. And he found it, he thought it was all a nuisance, you know. And I don't think government should run theatre. He had been a politician. And Yeats was fed up with it. He got offside and everything. So they gave it to this really dreary man, you know.
Is he still alive? Because I wouldn't want to be sued.
No. No, it was very old even then, you know. But there was a story that there was this great actor, Jack McGarren, who was a favourite of Beckett's. And Jack gave me my first job in London when I went there without an audition, because I told him, we talked about Blythe, and Jack had been an actor in the Abbey, and he was very good in a play where he played an Indian peddler, which you wouldn't be allowed to do these days, but he played an Indian peddler, you know, before Peter Sellers did all that voice and everything. And he got wonderful reviews, and he went in to see Blythe about it and said, you know, I'd like some more roles and a bit more money maybe and all this. And Blythe said, well, you see, Jack, we don't need an Indian every day. and this was a famous story that they all told me around there in the Abbey. And then when I went to see Jack, you know, in Kenco coffee shop in Marylebone High Street, and he said, well, would you like to play Tommy Owens? I said, yeah, do you want me to audition? He said, no, it's fine. He said, your professional credentials are fine with me. Of course, I hated Blythe. And he just gave me the part because he recognized the soulmate of it.
Was there part of you that thought to go to London because I want to get out of Ireland?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was the 60s, and you know, it was supposed to be swinging London. Though my virginity remained intact for quite a while, or maybe not quite, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was a completely different. I didn't have a rave-up. I got a flowered shirt like the Stones.
But so you went for the sex and didn't find it?
Well, eventually.
You know what I mean? Well, you never can find it when you're looking for it.
So, God, when did you meet Neil Jordan? Because you obviously had a massive influence on your...
Oh, God Almighty. I watched Angel. I'm telling you, this is like I haven't seen it for many years, and I don't know anybody. It's his first movie that he would dare to take the time to let images evolve and emotions to develop. It's the most wonderful piece of work, you know, and it doesn't give in to kind of modern filmmaking of bang, 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 you know, the American stuff.
But he wrote Danny, the part of Danny.
I like to think so.
Yeah. So where would you have met him? How? What would you have seen?
I knew him as a writer. I knew him as he was a short story writer and a novelist. And that's what Heath he thinks we met in London, I think we met in Dublin. I don't, and anyway, he just came. I'd done quite a bit of theatre, and I thought I'd really like to do a movie, and I didn't know how to get into a movie, you know. I didn't, and then he walked up one day and said, "I've got this script. Would you like to read?"
Well, that's our first clip. Now, Neil Jordan says he wrote that part for you because he'd seen you on stage.
Yes.
And he thought you had the qualities of a James Dean or a Robert Mitchum.
Oh my God. Well, Robert Mitchum is a clear favourite of mine, I must say. I thought he was fantastic. He just, a flicker would go across his eyes and you know that he'd had a major thought, you know. He was great, yeah. Well, I'm honoured about that, really. But I think he's a wonderful filmmaker, and I don't know how he was so self-possessed as to make that as his first movie, you know.
And that was your first?
That was my first movie too, yeah.
Did you like the script, or did you just do it?
I didn't fully understand it, you know, because it was it's not that it wasn't vague. It was just it had a kind of mysterious feel to it, you know. It was. I mean, you know, I didn't get lost or anything, but
we chose that clip because that's the moment that the whole film changes, isn't it?
Mm.
That's the moment that he goes from being a laid-back saxophonist
yeah,
to being a killer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and but it's just the way he films it with those shoes, you know, and it's yeah, that's when he becomes utterly confused, isn't it?
Now, Angel was liked by the critics. Did it do any business anywhere? I mean, did people like it?
Oh, it was very much liked, and particularly it was liked by Channel 4. You know the guy that ran Channel 4?
Jeremy Isaacs?
Jeremy Isaacs, yeah. And that meant a lot for Neil, and I think it meant quite a lot for Irish cinema, you know, that it was strong, and I mean, and it's very influenced by French cinema, I think, as well at the time. Yeah.
Did you like it as a film?
I loved it this morning. Yeah. No, I think it was wonderful, and Chris Menzies was the cinematographer, and I think he taught Neil a lot, and he taught all of us a lot, you know, and it was great.
Yeah.
He said a very interesting thing, Chris Menzies. We were shooting a scene, and Neil was shooting on Honor, Heffernan, and he got that, and then he says, "Okay, let's move on." And I kind of said to him, "Don't you want to turn around on me?" Like, you know. And he said, "No, we've got it. And Chris just very quietly said, "Always go to the editor with the full complement of shots." And I thought that was a fantastic, clear piece of advice.
So shoot you even if they might not use it?
Even if they don't use it.
Yeah.
Because you might know until you're in the editing suite whether you want to use it or not, you know.
Now, moving on, it was 10 years later. It was 10 years between making that film and when you made, you know, probably the biggest of the kind.
Well, I was in one before that, which was Company of Wolves,
yeah,
which was quite soon after Angel. But yeah, then I was doing a lot of touring theatre, touring Ireland with this company, Field Day Theatre Company, and so I didn't have much time to do any other thing. And then I decided I wanted to do another picture, and my agent at the time said to me, "Well, the way to remain available is not to accept anything until you get a film." So I stopped work, turned everything down, and within 2 weeks I got the message about Crying Game.
Yeah. And did you see that as a script, read it and say, this is...
No, Neil told it to me as a story.
Yeah.
sitting across a table from me. You know, so he has the British soldier thing, and he goes to London, and then he meets the girlfriend and goes back to her house flat, and they start to make love, and then he said, and she's a man.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll do it.
Let's just show a clip of the triangle.
Girls thingamy.
I mean, we chose that clip because it shows an IRA man not being an IRA man.
She's being an IRA woman.
She is.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting relationship, isn't it, between him and the soldier?
Yeah, well, you see, Neil always said the thing was, Forrest's character has to seduce Fergus in order to escape being killed.
Yeah.
Or even just to stay alive a bit longer. So that's what the relationship is, and he's successful with it. He seduces him totally, really. Or seduces him back to a further humanity, away from...
But is that what Fergus was anyway, really?
A decent human being?
Yeah.
Well, maybe everybody is, I don't know. Yeah.
Do you think she was then?
Well, that's a different matter. I don't know. She was meant to be a hard ticket, all right, yeah.
But in the end, your character goes to London, almost gives up on the IRA, and in the end meets the soldier's girlfriend, who, as you say, is a bloke.
I hope they knew that anyway. No, I think I told this story yesterday. When it was screened in China, the title was changed to "Oh no, my girlfriend has a penis." Yeah, no, I think he's just running from, in a funny way, like in The Angel, the guy is running from the experience that he had of that girl being shot in
Yeah.
Angel. So he's running from that, yeah, for sure. But he's running to. Can you hear properly?
Yeah.
He's. I don't know. Maybe he's maybe running to find Forrest again. I don't. You know what I mean?
But I mean, the final scene of the film, in the prison, he's now doing time for the murder.
Yeah.
That he had done, and yet there's a relationship there by then, isn't
There very much so is, yeah. And he's, it's a beautiful moment in the film where he before that, where he tells her, I have to leave, I have to get out of here because, and she says, why? And he says, well, you're a man, and I have to, that isn't right for me, so I have to go. And she says, well, kiss me before you go. He kisses her, and he's drawn right back into it, So maybe it's his true identity, or at least with that,
I mean, it won all sorts of awards. It won Best Film at BAFTA. You won Best Actor at BAFTA, I think. It got nominated for an Oscar in the States.
And he got the best screenwriter.
Yeah. Did you know that was going to happen?
No, I hadn't a clue. I said to my agent, it's a lovely script, but I mean, I can't see it doing anything. But, I thought it might be too difficult. And it wasn't without difficulty, you know what I mean? I said this yesterday as well, but the British didn't like it, you know, because they couldn't. At first, they didn't like it because they didn't like an IRA man to be sensitive.
Yeah.
They didn't believe. They refused to believe that. And then, but in America, they went for it big time because it was sex, and they like a lot of sex. The Americans, have you noticed?
And you became a gay icon for a while?
For an afternoon or so.
Right. I better tell me a bit about you and Neil Jordan. I mean, what is it about that matters so much to you?
It's because it's partly you don't fully understand it. It's not part of your work on it is finding a way to understand it and be you know, when he did End of the Affair, which I didn't really want to, I played the husband of I've forgotten her name. Julia Moore. And I said to him, I just don't want to play a dreary old cuckold, you know. And so he imbued it with a lot more passion, even though he wasn't her love. She was his love, you know, and it made it another little essay on jealousy and on, you know, but I'm able to talk to him, you know, I think it's that, you know.
So it's trust.
Yes, trust. And I kind of am blown away when I see that movie this morning, and I think the way he constructs thought and emotion and imagery, it's extraordinary.
Now, the third film you chose here was V for Vendetta.
Yeah, well, I was trying to get away from the just purely Irish program,
Yeah.
you know, but that was an international film.
Okay, let's just have a look at the clip. Now, in that film, you go from starting off as one of the bad guys,
Yeah.
to becoming one of the good guys.
Yeah. Well, that's the great progress of that is that he learns about what's really happening. But and what was interesting about that scene was there used to be there was a man in England who called John Stalker. Do you remember the Stalker thing? And he was sent over to Ireland, to the north of Ireland, to investigate the RUC and their involvement in sectarian killings. And so that isn't, obviously, that wasn't in the original thing of V for Vendetta. But I was telling the Wachowskis about this, and he had his career ruined because his mother was Irish, and he listened to all the stories, you know. His mother was from Monaghan, and so that was, I wanted that, I offered that to them because just to be Irish was to be suspicious, you know.
Yeah. That in some ways it's prophetic, that film, isn't it? When you look at it now, that it talks about a worldwide pandemic in 2020, which was just about right. Yeah, and you know the growth of the sort of populist leader, the sort of that had there. I mean, you know, there's a bit of Donald Trump about that, isn't there?
Oh God, yeah. No, I know.
You know, you look at this growth of populism that is coming in certain European countries, and you think, well, hang on, this is what this was written, and it was written to be in 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, I thought it was a fantastic film, and younger people who know nothing about didn't know anything about crane game or anything. They were fascinated by it and used to talk to me about it, you know. And
The Wachowskis they're the people who did Matrix, aren't they?
yes.
And Matrix was before this?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well before it, yeah.
What were they like to work with?
Right, well, they were fascinating. At that time, they were both men, and now they're both women. But that's interesting in itself, I suppose.
Yeah.
No, they were fantastic directors as well. You know, they weren't actually directing that movie. But they were doing, at the end of the day, if there was any stuff left to do, it would go to the second unit, and they were running the second unit, you see. So the guy was directing it, a nice guy. I think I told this yesterday, but the thing is that my character walks into a bathroom and there's a corpse on the floor, and it says in the script that I'm obsessive about this rose that is lying on the body of the corpse. But the shot was so wide, there was no way I could do that, you know.
Yeah.
I walked into the bathroom, but you couldn't see that I was obsessive. So anyway, we didn't get the shot, and then the next morning I went into the thing, and the Wachowskis lined up the shot that we were going to do, and it was a two-shot of me and a rose. It was, you know, you couldn't miss, you know, I didn't have to do anything. It was obviously I was looking at the rose, and I just thought that was a fantastic lesson as well, you know, to minimize acting as much as possible.
Now, my final clip, which I think I'd like to ask a few questions about, was from a stage production made at the Royal Court, or first shown at the Royal Court.
I think it opened in Dublin,
Yeah.
at the Abbey, and then it went to the Royal Court.
Then it went to the Royal Court. We got it from the Royal Court because they've streamed it.
Yes.
This isn't a clip because they wouldn't give us a clip. I don't know why, but they would let us use the trailer. So we'll just show the trailer. I watched it for the first time last week, and I was blown away by it. I mean, I don't know how many people, well, we know, because I asked earlier how many people have seen it, but I was absolutely shaken by it. Yeah. And I was watching it on a little screen. What was it like in the theatre?
It was pretty shattering, and often people would just sit in the audience and not move at the end of it. It was pretty terrifying, yeah.
Well, I mean, for those who haven't seen it, it's about a strong Northern Ireland Protestant who thinks his daughter's new baby is Jerry Adams. And it starts being quite funny at places.
Yeah.
And then it becomes horrific.
Yeah, it's horrific, yeah.
Was it horrific to play?
Yeah, it was horrific, yeah.
You did it night after night?
Night after night. I refused to do it 8 times a week. I did it 7 times a week. But I couldn't, but it, well, the Royal Court is used to killing babies on stage, you know. That is Edward Bond thing, but the wonderful thing about David is, yeah, he comes from a very, very loyalist background, and yet when he's writing, he rises above it. He remains a loyalist, but he is utterly savage about what they're capable of, you know. And
I read a piece written by you, which is, or I paraphrase it, it says Unionists are not just cut off from Catholics, or not just cut off from Ireland, but they're cut off from the rest of the world.
who said that?
You.
Pretty smart.
I mean, is that your view?
Oh, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. I do think they're so ill that it needs the British government needs to take responsibility for the steps they take to help them get better. And that means they have to say, look, we've had enough. Say in 10 years' time, we are going to cease to have any control over this tiny piece of land, and you've got to come to terms with the other people who live in it.
The play suggests that your character's daughter doesn't care about it.
Yeah, she's...
And is that true of the whole generation, do you think, of unionists? That their kids, it's gone. It's something that was yesterday.
I don't know, actually, to be honest, but you know, it's no good just going into kind of lethargy of not caring. You don't get over that kind of psychopathic shit without serious thought and work, you know. It's going to take a long time to get rid of that kind of appalling bigotry, you know. It really is. You have to work at it. I mean, you know, you hear the DUP speaking it all the time, you know. They're...
When I was at the BBC, I mean, it's the only time in my life I've been involved in a bit of Northern Ireland. And if you're a Brit coming to Northern Ireland, you're shocked by it, really. I mean, I remember Trimble coming up to me, you know, who was the equivalent of First Minister, coming up to me, poking me, saying, "You've let the papists take over the BBC." And that's because we'd appointed a Catholic woman to be the head of the BBC in Northern Ireland. And, you know, it comes as a shock. I mean, I remember the director of television going over there, and he went into a meeting only with the unionists, and when he came out, someone said to him, "Where have you been?" He said, "I've been in the 16th century." These were people who knew nothing really about the politics of Northern, that sort of politics of Northern Ireland. We all knew the politics of the Troubles.
Yeah, but about the BBC, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, there was never anything on the BBC News about Gaelic football. Never. There is now, and when I turn on the news from the north, and they say, there's Derry are playing down and so on, I'm surprised, because it was forbidden. So there was the other side of the community didn't exist for them.
There were, as I understand it, there were no Catholics working for the BBC prior to 1970.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
And which is why it would have reported in that way, and which is also interestingly why a lot of the panoramas and who went over to do things about the Troubles wouldn't go anywhere near BBC Northern Ireland because it was Protestant.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. It's hateful.
Yeah.
But I've got two nieces who work in the BBC now because they were allowed in because of the Irish language. But then they moved because somebody else decided that the Irish language would be used, and then they moved towards politics and sport. You know, but they wouldn't have been in there if it hadn't been for that.
Do you think you will see a united Ireland in your lifetime?
Well, when I see footage of 30,000 Orangemen walking around and saying we will never enter a united Ireland, I just don't know. And I'm deeply concerned about not just the attitude of Northerners, but of people in the South, people in the Republic who have no interest in, there's a certain smugness of attitude about, you see, the thing goes back a long way. We were talking about Ernest Blythe. Now, he was in the government, and 100 years ago, Northern Catholics came to Dublin and asked to speak to the government about the new partition that was occurring, and they say, we're going to be stuck with purely loyalist, unionist government. And what are you going to do about it? They said to Ernest Blythe, and Ernest Blythe said, we're not going to do anything about it. Go back up the road. And they came back later and spoke to a man called Kevin O'Higgins, and he was worse. He said, no, we've spoken to the British government. We are not going to interfere in the northern state, right? So they were so, I'm sorry, but they were so used to looking after themselves. And I understand to get the thing off the ground, but during that time, leading up to 1969, the Catholics were living pogrom, the whole thing of rigged elections, you know, majority Catholic in Derry, no representatives, you know, it's just, so it has been horrible for 100 years, and I think people have to understand that it was, and look at this nonsense over the protocol. It's only because they won't sit down with a first minister who's a Catholic. They won't have it. What they're saying as they're walking around is that this state was formed for us, not for them. And they haven't let that go. How do you get them to let that go? It's an absolute nightmare.
But you don't think it's gradually dying? That generation who felt so strongly.
Well, if it's gradually dying, then but I still will never live to see a united Ireland. It has to die a bit quicker than that.
What about your kids then? Will they live to see United Ireland?
And my kids live in Dublin, you know, and they love it, and they went to Gael Schull, and they're perfectly, they don't have any identity issues about that kind of thing. But, you know, I mean, at one point where I was watching a thing on television, a young Catholic had been beaten up in Coleraine, and my eldest son, Danny, was sitting beside me. He says, am I a Catholic? You know, so he was looking out for his safety, you know. And I thought, it's great that he doesn't know. I don't know.
Would he be a nationalist?
Oh, yeah.
You're a nationalist, presume?
Yes, I'm a nationalist, yeah. Yeah, of course I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last question, then we'll open it up. Pete, I mean, how did you... I mean, the pandemic was fascinating because suddenly people who've been in work for years had no work. They got some money, but they had no work. What did you do?
Well, I was a bit unnerving. I had 3 series ready to go at the beginning of the pandemic, and only one of them survived. And I did it last year, but then that meant last year I was doing the work that belonged to the previous year,
yeah.
You know. But we've got a nice garden, and we planted a lot of trees, and me and the boys hung out and had fun, yeah. Now I'm thoroughly fed up with it. I mean, you know.
What, doing the garden?
Yeah.
Well, the garden is amazing, you know, but it's just... but I was talking to... great American actress who I've been working with, and she had a terrible time. She can't remember her lines now. Never happened before. And this was happening to me too. It's because we didn't work for a year or more, you know. And I said, this is terrible. And she said, it's Kathy Bates is her name. And she said, it's happening to all the actors. Even Streep can't remember her lines.
And it came because you'd lost the technique.
Yeah, a bit of the machinery just slipped, I think, you know. It's possible. I know it.
Okay, we're going to take some, I'm not sure, we haven't got a lot of time, but we'll take some questions from the floor, if anyone will come here.
I was wondering how you felt about we were talking earlier there, definitely not open. I'll speak up. About sort of the situation, the political situation in the north. And I did a film for the BBC 10 years ago about the history of the Derry Walls. Nobody hear me?
Come and stand here.
I'll sit down. I did a film 10 years ago for the BBC about the history of the Derry Walls, and in the pitch meeting there was a debate about whether or not we could say Derry first or we had to say Londonderry, because in the rules of BBC News and BBC NI, the word Londonderry was always used first. But I was making the film in Gaelic, so I got around it by saying you can't say Londonderry in Irish, it doesn't work grammatically, you know, so we'll just say Derry and then we'll say Londonderry. And I think, do you think there'll be a softening of those sort of rules as time goes on? Because I think sort of those simple rules need to be made a wee bit more open, I think.
Well, I don't think the unionists will ever let go of the notion of calling it Londonderry. I don't think they will. It just stands that Catholics say Derry, but I think Paisley started the Londonderry thing. He drove it through with. This man was a truly evil figure, you know, and he. I mean, I can remember in the 60s just that when things weren't so bad, you were asking me if what it was like before the Troubles. But when Pope John the 23rd died, and he was a great ecumenical man, and the Unionist party who were in charge in the City Hall in Belfast lowered the flag to half-mast out of respect, and which was an unusual thing. And then Paisley was outside ranting and screaming about this, and you know, they're taking away our traditions and everything. And I think he started the Londonderry thing. I think ordinary Derry people just called it Derry.
Yeah.
Didn't they?
Yeah, 100%. Everybody just calls it Derry.
Yeah. So it's we're being tormented by a kind of you know, an awful bigotry, you know.
Any more questions? There's one down here.
You know the way the Alliance Party has made gains now in the elections. Is that shift going to continue, or is it just a temporary thing, do you think?
Well, I mean, I know that, you know, I quite like the girl Miriam, what was her name? Naomi Long, yeah. I'm not a middle of the road person myself, you know, and you know, it's I think they remain unionist in the fact that they're kind of like nice unionists, you know, but they're not radical. They're just let's just look after people and do. But in order to get at the poison of a divided country, we're going to have to be a bit more determined, I think, you know.
Any more questions? There's one in there, and there's one over there. It doesn't matter. Okay. We're going to do both. We're going to do both, and then we'll.
Do you not think that after the Le Mans bombing in 1978, when there was 12 dog breeders killed in that appalling explosion, because the IRA actually used a napalm-like substance. Just, in fact, I remember seeing a photograph in the front of the Sunday Times of what was left of a human being. It was unrecognisable, but would you not have thought that after 1978 the IRA could have said, listen, we've had enough of killing? No?
Well, eventually they did, but you know, the truth of the matter is, up until 1969, the killing was all one way. And I'll tell you that in 1969, some of us who were on the Falls Road, I was fired at by loyalists who were being driven by Paisley from the ship. Now what that did was that set in motion a reaction that got worse and worse. Of course it did. I think the violence is in the nature of the state. I think there's going to be, you know, those thousands of loyalists are going to go mad again. You know, I think there'll be more violence. And I think there's, you could pick on other very violent things. Like I read a poem the other day at a poem that Seamus Heaney wrote. I was asked to go, this man called Sean Brown, who worked for, who was a GAA man, was killed by the RUC while he was closing the gates of the ground. And still nobody has been caught for that, although everybody in Balahi knows who did it. It was the RUC. And so I get your point, but at the same time, the lawmakers were also the lawbreakers in the North, big time.
Final question over there.
So, how many films have you made, and which is your favourite film of all time?
I think my favourite film of all time is The Crying Game, and I have made over 100 films. I know.
I remember having David Putnam here once, and I asked him about film, why he'd stopped being a filmmaker. He said, I couldn't stand another Candlewick bedspread. Basically, he wanted to live at home. You know, do you ever have that? I mean, because you must move all the time.
Yeah, I do. No, I just, you know, I hate getting up in the morning and putting on my clothes and then going to a trailer and taking my clothes off and putting on somebody else's clothes, and then waiting around, and the door of the trailer keeps banging. We'd like you on set now, Stephen. I said, oh. It's just, you know, that is the hard part. That is the impossible part, really, isn't it?
But you're going to keep going.
Yeah, that's what Robert Altman, who I did a film with, that's what he said when he was coming near the end, and he just finished the film, and he'd been ill, but he was getting ready to do another film. I said, another film? And he said, gotta keep going. Yeah, that's what life is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Until we do. Can I just say, on behalf of the festival, they have a trophy for you which says, for your outstanding contribution to the world of film.
Outstanding contribution to the world.
Okay, on behalf of everybody here, thank you for coming and thank you for a fascinating interview.
Thank you.